incredibly important to point out that Virginia over the last several years has expanded access to the ballot. And we did so to include expanding no excuse absentee voting, establishing drop boxes, automatic voter registration, just a few of the things that we've done here in Virginia. And what we saw is over the course of the last 4 years, we have seen unprecedented turnout in all 4 of the elections that I've been privileged to oversee during my tenure here. From 2017, the gubernatorial election, we saw about 700,000 more voters come out to participate in the election than we saw in 2017. So expanding access is giving more Virginians the ability to cast their ballots and do so successfully. And it shows that we can still have robust competition and strong races throughout. It's great to see that as we certify this election, that we can do so with confidence. And I'm very proud to oversee this team here at the Department of Elections, and just as proud to work with the incredible people from across the Commonwealth who administer elections at the local level. Today represented by the VIBA president, Barbara Taft, and the VRAV president, Brenda Cabrera. They lead the organizations incredibly well and have been a great partner to us at the Department of Elections. This is how we've been able to ensure successful elections here in the Commonwealth, and we couldn't do it without their partnership. Plus the more than 10,000 election officers who worked during the 45 days leading up to the election and then the day of the election, and the numerous others who participated in the process. Very proud to have been part of this, and thank you all for your leadership and partnership as we continue to ensure safe, secure, and successful elections here in the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, on election night, there were a few issues, typical issues. The biggest issue that we encountered were the result of unprecedented turnout in some areas, where we saw some localities run short of ballots, but they were able to adjust, make more ballots available, and provide them to those precincts so that voting went on unabated. So we're very, very glad to say that it was so successful, so smoothly run. Now, we've already received one notice that there will be a request for a recount in Prince George County. Congratulations, Barbara. I will point out that race is the difference in the margin of victory is 6 votes. So once again, we have another election to point to where we say every single vote absolutely matters. So these unprecedented turnouts that we're seeing around the Commonwealth in each and every election, I think people are getting that message. So that's great. We will be assisting Prince George with their recount and providing as much assistance as we can. But the good news is that the recount process in Virginia is fairly smooth and well defined. You all, just a few years ago, passed changes, modifications to the standards and to the step-by-steps, essentially. So the recount information is available online. We do anticipate the potential for a couple of recounts in House of Delegates races. We will be working with those localities as well. So, as a point, I think it's important that we all understand how recounts work here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I will go over a high-level explanation of what happens. So first of all, there's no such thing as an automatic recount in Virginia. The losing candidate must petition the court for a recount. But before we get to that point, to qualify for a recount, the difference in the margin of victory must be 1% or less. And then you're eligible to request a recount or petition the court for a recount. If the percentage of victory is 0.5% to 1%, the losing candidate can petition a recount, but they will have to pay for the recount. To give you an example, in last year, 2020, we had a recount, or no, 2019, we had a House of Delegates recount that was 37,000, I think it was, that the cost of the recount was. Now, if the difference in the margin of victory is 0 to 0.5%, in that case, the losing candidate can petition the court for a recount, and the state will pay, or the governing bodies will pay. And so that's between 0 and 0.5%. So today you're going to certify the election. And that starts the clock ticking. The losing candidates in races that meet that eligibility requirement have 10 days from today to request, petition the court for a recount. 10 days from today is Thanksgiving. I'm pretty sure there won't be a judge available. The next day, the courts are also closed. Excuse me, I coached the Richmond Marathon team on Saturday, so there was a lot of yelling, so I apologize. I am not sick. But 10 days will be Thanksgiving. The next day, courts are also closed. So the deadline in this case will be November 29th. Okay. So at that point, the losing candidate petitions the court for a recount. It then becomes a judicial process, essentially. And judges will be appointed who will then oversee the process. Now, there are certain things laid out in code. I won't get into the details about how a recount actually works from there. But I think it's important to note, in Virginia, we use 100% paper ballots, voter verified paper ballots. During that process, the ballots will be rerun through those machines. Any ballots that are not accepted by the machines will be hand counted by a recount court, the recount officials. These are election officials representing both parties, and determinations are made through that. I think it's important to understand that process. But yes, all ballots are rerun through the machines, and we then determine who the winner is after that recount, and we can be certain that the winner will have gone through a very thorough process. And the votes will go through a very thorough process. I think it will be, if there are recounts beyond just Prince George, again, we will see the dedication of local election officials and how hard they work to ensure that outcomes are reported correctly when they certify the election. So last but not least, I wanted to point out that you are here to certify the election. On Tuesday, November 9th, just 6 days ago, localities were required to certify their local elections. They reported that information to us, and we have been spending the last, when I say we, I didn't. Very dedicated and awesome staff has worked very hard to check and recheck those results. And this came after the localities had checked and rechecked their results. So we have arrived here at a time where I think we can be very, very confident in the outcome of the election overall. So with that, I think I've covered everything I need to discuss, and I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Piper. Do members have any comments or questions of the commissioner?
One, Mr. Chairman. Does the department plan to make the sacred glass bowl available to Prince George if needed?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, yes. Anybody who needs to borrow the glass bowl is welcome to it. But I hope, that the process will bear out and we'll see, a definitive result in those races. So, but yes, glad to know there won't be any VMFA bowls, at least that I can see so far.
All right. Any additional comments or questions? Thank you, Commissioner Piper. The next order of business then is the certification of the general election of November 2nd, 2021. Mr. Saunders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The 2021 November general election included races for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, as well as all 100 district representatives in the House of Delegates, results of which must be endorsed and subscribed on a certified statement from the State Board of Elections. Upon completion of the election, local general registrars entered all relevant election data into the Virginia election and registration system. In accordance with law, within 7 days after the election, local electoral boards conducted provisional ballot meetings and canvasses to ascertain and certify election results for their localities. Upon completion of canvass, the general registrars forwarded their localities certified abstracts of votes and, when applicable, write-in certifications to the Department of Elections. Upon receipt of the localities' abstracts and write-in certifications, to ensure accuracy and completion, elect staff confirmed all required abstracts and write-in certifications were completed and submitted, ran turnout versus votes cast reports, and asked localities to resolve and or explain any issues identified, and compared those results listed in the abstracts and write-in certifications to the results entered in Veris to ensure accuracy. Therefore, it is elect staff's recommendation that the board certify the statements to be correct and sign the statements and certificates of election. There is a suggested motion in the board's working papers, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Do the members have any comments or questions of Mr. Saunders? If not, I'll entertain a motion that the board certify the results of the general election of November 2nd, 2021.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. O'Bannon.
I have a motion.
uh,
Thank you. After reviewing the abstracts of votes cast in the November 2021 general election, I move the board certify the statements to be correct and sign the statements and certificates of election. But just thank you all for all your hard work on this in timely fashion. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. O'Bannon. Is there a second to his motion?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the board certify the results of the general election of November 2nd, 2021. Secretary LaCruz, will you call the roll?
Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Dr. Bannon,
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz. Aye. Delegate Merrick's.
Aye.
Ms. Chang. Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Our next order of business is a discussion of the events surrounding the resignation of the registrar for Charles City County in September of this year. With the concurrence of the other members of the board, I requested that we address this matter today because it directly implicates our responsibility under the code to supervise and coordinate the work of local electoral boards and registrars. To assist us in better understanding the circumstances surrounding this incident, I invited the chair and members of the Charles City County Electoral Board, as well as the former registrar, to give their perspectives on this matter. I understand that Kevin Sullivan, the vice chair of the Charles City County Electoral Board, will be with us today. As of this morning, we had not heard from the former registrar. Because this matter also involves the working relationship between the local elections office and the county government, I invited the Charles City County Administrator to appear. She has provided a letter to the board, and I understand that she will join us virtually to answer any questions we might have. Do the members have any questions or comments at this point? I've also asked the Office of the Attorney General to give an overview of the respective oversight and supervisory responsibilities of the board, local electoral board, and the local registrar under the code. Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Chairman Brink. Step back. Just having so as just a 30,000 foot view of the oversight system that goes on in Virginia's election, Obviously, the State Board of Election is charged under Virginia Code 24.2103 with overseeing, supervising, and coordinating the work of both the county and city electoral boards and of the registrars in order to maintain uniformity in their practices and proceedings and to ensure legality and purity in all elections. On the local level, electoral boards are combined of three individuals, two from the majority party, one from the minority party. Those individuals are in charge of overseeing elections on the local level and also appointing general registrars. Under their authority, they are charged with appointing, removing, and evaluating on an annual basis the general registrars. General registrars are then charged with carrying out the daily administrative tasks to ensure that the local elections are carried out properly. They are often assisted by staff, depending on the size of their office, and are charged with multiple different duties in order to make sure that elections are conducted in an efficient manner and that maintaining voter registration and conducting the election.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions of Ms. Lewis? If not, I'd like Mr. Nichols now to give a chronology of the events that surrounded this matter. Mr. Nichols?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I did provide the memo, and it does have some basic information in there. I'll just summarize most of that today's meeting. We did learn on the night before early voting was supposed to start that there were some interpersonal issues between the general registrar in Charles City County and some folks who worked for the county government there. My understanding at that time was that things had become quote unquote serious, but I wasn't given any details of what was happening there, just that it was becoming problematic. The next morning, we did learn that the Charles City County office did not open for early voting expected. And of course, the 46th day before the general election is when early voting is supposed to start. Technically, that's the Saturday, and this was the Friday. So there was still some time there to make things happen, but most offices are not open on Saturday, so they open on the Friday to make sure that they've complied with that part of the law and offered the early voting 45 days before the election. I did manage to call and speak with the general registrar as she was in her office. She had told me that the doors were locked and she was not letting anyone in, and that she and her deputy were in there packing up their personal belongings. And then several hours later, we did find out that the office had been vacated and there was no one else in there. We worked very closely with, my memo actually says he's the chair of the board, he's the vice chair of the board, so I apologize for that. Mr. Sullivan, to ensure that the next day we could have early voting up and running so that they would meet compliance with the law. We worked with elect staff, several of them, and I mentioned them in the memo, as well as 3 general registrars who were extremely helpful in this process to make sure that the office was open and that everything was good to go. And they did have voters come in on that Saturday, even though it's not a day they would normally be open. They did have voters come in to vote. So after that, of course, by Monday morning, those general registrars had to go back to their offices to manage and run their own early voting. We continued to send staff down through that next week to make sure that the voting could still happen, while the electoral board worked very quickly to find and replace the general registrar and hire someone and have them in place for that next Monday, the 27th. From there, we of course worked with that general registrar to ensure that everything went smoothly for the rest of the election.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. One thing I'd like to say is that the staff and the registrars and the other people that you called upon to assist did a wonderful job of making things happen. Of course, this incident never should have happened in the first place, but once it did, I think that all of you pulled together in order to ensure that the voters of Charles City County would be able to exercise their rights under the code.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was tough sledding for a little while, as there were periods of time when I was on a Zoom meeting with 3 other people, and all 4 of us were on the telephone with other people trying to make sure we could get staffing there for the next day. But it's amazing to watch this elections community work together to solve an issue and a problem like this. We couldn't have done it without the help of the general registrars that came that day. They were fantastic. They provided additional documents and things that we at Elect don't typically use, but they're used at the local level. And it was really something to watch all of that come together, so that by, even if it was 9 o'clock on Friday night when a couple of us were still working to put some bits and pieces together, the next morning it was open and up and running, and contacted another general registrar to get instructions for opening the voting machine so that it was ready to go. And it really does show the commitment of everyone at the state office as well as the local offices to make sure every voter is served. And from the local level, not even just their own voters. They're concerned about the voters in other places too.
Do members have any questions of Mr. Nichols?
Is Ms. Johnson the county? So I had a question.
Those reports came, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm trying to remember, a lot has happened since middle of September. I believe those came up in a phone call with the vice chair of the board, who said that he had heard the voters had been turned away.
Additional questions or comments? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Nichols. And once again, thanks to you and the other members of the staff and the members of the election community who were able to pull together and make a bad situation less bad.
Yes, thank you.
Is Mr. Sullivan either with us in person or online? Mr. Sullivan, would you like to join us? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, I can answer the question about the people who were turned away. 5 people were turned away on that Friday, but we had a list of the names. So called all those people, made sure that they knew that polls were now open, and by the end of the following week, all of them had voted. We did follow up on that. And I'd also like to say I really want to thank all the people that helped us out, because I didn't find out about this situation until out of town on that Friday morning. And I found out morning phone call at breakfast what was going on. And as I was driving home, I was calling the Board of Elections. And we worked out the fact that we had to open on Saturday, which was okay. I mean, and which we had to do. There was no doubt about that. Expressed by Mr. Nichols to me that we had no other choice. But the people that showed up to help were absolutely incredible. Had General Registrar from York County, from James City County, Tosin. People were just, we had more help than we had voters, actually, which was good because we needed it. And by that following Monday, we had found someone who was already qualified and trained to do the job, which is almost impossible. And so it did work. A bad situation was made better. Really appreciate all the help that given by the board and the registrars. And I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Members have any questions of Mr. Sullivan? I do have one, and I don't know if it would be better to hear from Ms. Johnson first or not, but obviously, the situation was resolved following the closure of the office and the resignation of the registrar and her deputy. My concern is what led up to this event. Were you aware of tensions between the registrar and the county government?
Yes, it had been ongoing for, I would say, at least a year, back and forth, to the point where at one point, the county wanted to move the general registrar's office out of the county administration building. We informed them at that time that they wanted to do that, for one, an appropriate facility wasn't available in Charles City, and the other, with the constraints, the elections and early voting, that we could not make that move and notify all the voters. And so it was definitely an ongoing.
Members have additional questions or comments?
I had another question. This is related to actions that she had hostile staff. Were there any complaints?
Okay, if there aren't any additional questions, thank you for coming down, Mr. Sullivan, and
Sure.
and thank you for serving on the electoral board.
Thank you very much.
Michelle Johnson is the Charles City County Administrator. I understand that she's on the line. Correct? Ms. Johnson, can you hear us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Sorry.
Thank you. Now, we've received the letter that you sent to the members of the board this morning. What additional information would you like to provide, or are you available to answer questions also?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I did send you some communication on just a brief summary of what happened on the November 13th event. Like Mr. Sullivan said, this was a series of events that led up to this point where the registrar abruptly resigned. She has caused, over the course of the years, just a hostile environment with our Public Works Department, Information Technology, and our HR department specifically. Just every situation just would escalate into just outbursts and anger and just a lot of unprofessionalism that at some point in a lot of instances was just stressful and unbearable. And on the November 13th event, when I witnessed, digging for a vote here sign, I just asked my public works director to just ask them to stop because fiber hadn't been installed in that area. And so when he did, he was faced with an extreme amount of opposition that caused him to get our local deputies involved. And the situation just escalated from there. The former registrar just felt like she did not need to adhere to any county policy or procedures when it came to just functions within the county government over and over and over again. And so we continuously, experience problems from the former registrar. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Mr. Chairman.
Are we okay now?
We're okay.
All right. The excavation incident was September 13 rather than November 13, correct?
I'm sorry. Yes, September 13th. I'm sorry.
All right. Do the members have any other questions of Ms. Johnson? If not, Ms. Johnson, thank you for providing this input. Your letter will be made part of the record. And as I said, I'm less concerned about the specific incident than the conditions that led up to this incident and whether or not they reflect systemic problems or structural problems among electoral boards and local governments. So thank you for taking the time to join us today and for providing the information that you did. Are there additional questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, does any member of the public wish to be heard on this matter? If not, our next item of business, Dr. O'Bannon.
Choosing to bring this incident up and give some sunshine to the process here. Our elections, as our commissioner said, are all run by individual human. Probably some conflict is inevitable, but I think this clearly sends a message that your board feels very strongly that it's an incredibly important process and that maybe some opportunities to be proactive forward in this arena. I do want to thank you for choosing to put it on the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. O'Bannon. Any additional comments or questions? If not, the next item of business is the 2021 periodic review of regulations. Before Ms. Coles makes her presentation, I just wanted to say in reviewing this item over the weekend, I had several questions about 1 VAC 2020, which deals with structural changes after creation of the Department of Elections in 2014. The issues that I have aren't major at all, but I haven't had a chance to discuss them with the staff and the Office of the Attorney General. So without objection, we'll defer consideration of the 2020, the 1 VAC 2020 regulations until the December meeting and proceed to consider the other regulatory sections today. Ms. Cole?
Good afternoon, Chairman Brink, members of the board. So as we've stated, we're discussing the periodic review of regulations. And just to give kind of a brief overview, pursuant to Executive Order 14, as amended in July 16th of 2018, as well as the Code of Virginia, particularly the Administrative Process Act, as well as 1 VAC 2010-120, the State Board of Elections is required to conduct a periodic review of its regulations every 4 years. And specifically, our administrative code does state that we conduct a periodic review following each presidential election. So the purpose of this review is to determine whether a regulation should be repealed, amended, or retained in its current form. Public comment is sought on the review of each of our regulations, particularly if there are any issues relating to if it's necessary for protection of public health, safety, and welfare, or for the economical performance of important governmental functions, minimizes the economic impact on small businesses in a manner consistent with the stated objectives of applicable law, and is clearly written and easily understandable. And a periodic review also includes an examination by the Office of the Attorney General to ensure statutory authority. So following our periodic review and the public comment period and a review by the Office of the Attorney General, we discovered there are 4 administrative code sections require amending. So today we will just refer to 1 VAC 2040, 1 VAC 2045, and 1 VAC 2070. And then as Chairman Brink stated, then we can divide the motion and defer 1 VAC 2020 until the December meeting.
Thank you. Do the members have any comments or additional questions of Ms. Coles? Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion that the board adopt the proposed amendments to 1 VAC 2040, 2045, and 2070.
Chairman Brink?
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded that these three administrative sections be amended. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? I think probably we should have a roll call on this.
Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. Vannon,
Aye.
Secretary Cruz, aye. Delegate Mays.
Aye.
Ms. Chang,
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Coles. As I mentioned earlier, the next item on our agenda will be public comment. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on a matter that is not on today's agenda? Do we have anybody electronically who wishes to be heard? If not, we'll proceed to the next item on our agenda, which is the annual review of security standards pursuant to section 24.2-410.2 of the code. Ms. Hoyt-Stewart? Joined by Mr. Persico.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Brink, members of the board. We will do this relatively quickly. So this is our annual update to the voter registration system security standards, as well as general program updates to include some of our internal stats, which will be discussed in closed session. So we're going to go over the first off, we're going to go over the updates to this year, what's happened in 2021, leading to the 2022 proposed changes. We will also discuss some of our additional measures with regard to how to achieve compliance to these security standards. So just as a quick overview, especially for the new members of the board, back in 2019, House Bill 2178 was passed, establishing the State Board of Elections to have the ability to promulgate security standards that the localities would have to follow so that they can connect to VERIS, the Central Voter Registration Database. Once that law was passed, a work group was formed, led by myself and other members of the elect team, to establish these minimum security standards. In November of 2019, the first standards were promulgated, and we had a reporting or compliance by March of 2020, March 1st of 2020. A year passed, and the work group that established the standards initially changed to the VRSS Advisory Group. VRSS Advisory Group is the purpose of that group is to constantly analyze the threats and make recommendations to adjust the standards accordingly. In this year, we have continued to have the same composition of the VRSS Advisory Group, which includes 14 members total. We have 3 registrars, 3 electoral board members, myself, and then we have members of VML, VACO, some other elect participants, including Ms. White-Stewart and Ms. Ariel Schneider, as well as leaders from various localities, IT leaders specifically. And this group has been very, very, very hard at work to ensure that we are establishing the standards as set out by the previous promulgation that occurred last year, but also to find creative ways to help localities best meet the standards. So in 2021, we worked on some new areas of focus. We helped develop plans of action and milestone so that the localities could report on their status to these standards and how they were going to achieve that. We also we developed internally at the Department of Elections, established plans, policies, and procedures around all things information security. We then took those standards and turned them into a template form, which we then distributed out to localities for their use to help them better guide them to achieving some of the standards such as incident management, disaster recovery, or password protection, as just to name a few examples. That has been got a lot of positive feedback for the releasing those standards. Releasing those templates to help them meet the standards. In addition to that, I'll talk a little bit more about this in detail. That we've established a Cyber Navigator program, which we started about a year ago, and it's taken off pretty well. In 2022, we're looking towards, as in the working papers, rebranding what we call the minimum security standards, or MSS, to LESS. There was some confusion amongst localities about what standards needed to be met, and when you say minimum, that means all of them have to be met. As we know, in the cybersecurity space, you can never meet all standards. Nobody is ever that good in any organization I've worked in. So we wanted to make sure that we better aligned around what was actually required versus desired. And so we rebranded it to help avoid confusion. We've also worked towards redefining the roles and responsibilities. There's been a lot of question about who's responsible for what. The law clearly states that the Electoral Board is the accountable party with making sure that these standards are met. However, it's a team effort. A lot of that accountability is delegated down, or I should say the responsibility has been delegated from the Electoral Boards to the registrar, and then the registrar has to work with the localities, administration, and IT departments as applicable. There's been a lot of consternation in some places, as you can imagine, with who's doing what. So we were able to spell it out a little bit more in these standards that were proposed, the changes that we're proposing today, and we hope that would help provide clarity to the localities. Additionally, we are adding data privacy elements to the minimum, or the now LESS. We want to create an additional focus on the protection of data. In the elections community, we've done this at Elect. We obviously last year around this time hired a data privacy officer for our security team. So we take it seriously at our agency. We want to also propagate how serious we take it and fold it into the standards for the localities to protect voter information. You know, all election officials have quite a bit of personal identifiable information at their hands, and it needs to be protected. So we are adding those changes. And then to really help focus on actual threats, we have added what we call core compliance items to the new LESS. Those are the areas we would absolutely want localities to meet versus the entire standard, so that they can connect to Verus when we reduce risk through that way. Those standards can be updated according to the risk that may come up anytime. As we know, things happen. We saw, most of us know about the pipeline situation with the ransomware attack. As threats come up, we want to be able to address them. So we felt that going through building a set of standards, focusing on a set of standards within the core compliant, or within the LESS, be the best way to approach that. So we help localities prioritize what things that they need to address. And so in addition to that, the Cyber Navigator program is going to be another area that will help with, getting closer to these standards. So on that note, we would like to, so first, as we know, in HB 2178 was established in 2019, there was no resources or funding that was part of that bill. So we've had to be creative to help localities. One of those things is the Cyber Navigator program. We came up with the idea about a year ago. The group engaged with state-run higher eds, to include University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, ODU, George Mason, and more. We worked with those folks to figure out a way where we can use students who are in the study of computer science or cybersecurity, who also had to do some sort of work study or internship, to see if we can help utilize those students to maybe match them with a locality who needs the most help, and see kind of where we can. Since that idea first came out, we made some progress to include standing up a pilot program with Virginia Tech, where a course was built, a election security specific course taught to 3 students, professors from Virginia Tech, in addition to me, assisting with. We then used a locality, and I think I can disclose this locality that was local to Tech, as part of a pilot program where we brought the students this fall, which is on right now, to help go into the locality, assess where they're at, make some recommendations, and then provide an actionable artifact such as an incident response plan or something that was required by these minimum standards. We are also working with UVA, who had obtained a $3 million grant from the NSA to build this up even greater across all schools. We're hoping right now, and at the trajectory we're at, by spring of this year, all schools will teach a class, and hopefully by the summer, we will have students from all the universities that are participating, matching them up with some of our localities that be logistically heavy to make this program work. Had a lot of cooperation and a lot through, as we've talked through, cybersecurity doesn't stop with elections. It's everything we touch. So get ways that we could push that across the board. So far, even with the pilot program, stride. So happy to all of our partners who have helped. Leave it at that. Doctor, I'm going to hand it over to Karen so she can talk about Integra, which is our governance, risk, and compliance software. See, built.
And we were, okay, we're going to have a place to put everything, certifications and some logic and accuracy testing and everything. So we know and it's a secure location. So we're no longer doing form site. You're going to send this form here and that form there. It's going to have one area. So now we build in the MSS at that time, which is now LESS standards, a checklist. So the first year we sent out a spreadsheet with 443 responses and 21 different spreadsheets in an Excel file, which was huge. It's a huge undertaking by the general registrars and their IT departments, if they have IT departments. The Integra has built that all in. So yes, it's still a lift. It's still a lift. We didn't take the work away, but however, we made it a little easier. And also we designed Integra so that for the first year, you put in your responses, it carries up to the next year. So you know what you said last year. If you said, there's no way I'm getting this done this year, you know that because it's going to say there in the comment area. and so it helped them progress, so know what they met and what not met. The not mets are what we're using to determine prioritization for the Cyber Navigator program. We don't consider it 100% accurate, but we consider it 92.3% probably accurate. And so we're going to base our analysis of trying to match the localities with the interns that would best provide for them, using that data, but additional data that we might already know ourselves. We're excited about this Cyber Navigator program because, first of all, the localities have no expense. It's not their charge. The interns are going to get a specific training on, they're going to be trained on elections as well as the cybersecurity awareness and the needs, but they'll have the templates to work with, but they'll be able to assist the GRs in maybe just 2 or 3 compliance items this year, but then next year, maybe 2 or 3 more compliance items to get them moving forward in a positive and secure way for their cybersecurity. So, but Integra started out as just a regular program, and then we've expanded it, and the rest of it we have to show you in session. So,
Thank you,
Karen.
Mr. Pacheco and Ms. Hoyt-Stewart. I've got one question. Obviously, it's easier to work on security fixes with standalone IT department. How, of the 133 localities, how many do have an IT department?
We talk about that in closed session.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that'll be fine.
Thank you.
My other question, which is pretty small, is the NSA grant is to UVA. Are they the
That's correct.
the leadership, yeah.
They're the lead organization that secured the grant, are managing the funds and the distribution to the other universities.
members have additional comments or questions of Mr. Pacheco and Ms. Hoyt-Stewart? Dr. O'Bannon?
I had the opportunity to sit in on some of the early meetings. Much of this was driven from the JLARC report. Remember, it's been my experience as an outsider in the election world, that our GRs are not shy about complaining sometimes. It's be premature before closed session, but I have to say I haven't heard much, any other complaints, but I haven't heard much complaints about this process as it's played out, trying to get the floor up on everybody. This is a huge challenge with big counties and little counties. So heading closed session, I want to mention that.
Additional comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we go into closed session.
Chairman, I have a motion pursuant to Virginia Section 2.2-711. Session for the purpose of discussing the annual security standards review, Section 22-10-2, with Section 2.2-37F, Chris Piper, Commissioner of Elections, Daniel Persico, Chief Information Officer, Department of Elections, Karen Hoyt-Stewart, Locality Security Program Specialist, and Carol Lewis of the Office of Attorney General attend the closed session because will aid the board in its consideration of the subject.
Thank you, Secretary LaCruz. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we go into closed session. Secretary LaCruz, will you call the roll?
Great.
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. Bannon.
Aye.
Secretary.
5-0, and we will now go into closed session. Let us know when we're virtually closed.
Chairman, I move we adopt the VRSS Advisory Group and the Department of Elections recommended changes to the locality election security standards for locality compliance in 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board adopt the recommended security standard changes. Secretary LaCruz, will you call the roll?
Chairman Brink,
Aye.
Vice Chair Dr. O'Bannon,
Aye.
Secretary LaCruz. Aye. Delegate Merrick,
Aye.
Ms. Chang.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you for both of you for an excellent presentation. Do any members of the board have any additional comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.